Welcome back to Ignite on the Gold Coast. Here we are in beautiful sunny Australia. And of course, it's afternoon tea time on day two. I'm joined by two of my favourite Xamarin developers, Mike Ridland and Alec Tucker. It's a great time of the development process to be a cross-platform developer. So let's start off with who are you and what do you do? Alec.
I'm Alec Tucker. I run the Sydney Mobile.net Xamarin user group, or the Xamarin People's Front, if you want to call it that. I head up mobile development at White Clark in Sydney. We specialise in asset finance software, and I handle the mobile side of that.
And you're a Microsoft MVP in Xamarin and a Xamarin MVP in
Yes.
Microsoft or something?
Yes.
Yes.
One of the two of the
One
three.
of the two of the
Yes.
three. That's awesome. Great. And Michael?
So I'm a cross-platform mobile developer. I've been doing it for about 5 years now. Xamarin MVP, community blogger, so I do lots of blogging and open source projects and have a team of 5 people working with me doing Xamarin all day and night, which is
And
great.
you run Xamarin Hack Days?
Xamarin Hack Days, Xamarin Dev Days, so we do lots of work with the community,
Great.
which is good
And
fun.
You're also the author of some very cool open source stuff.
So
Tell us a bit about some of that.
A lot of the stuff is around Xamarin Forms, so there's Fresh MVVM, which is an MVM framework. Slide over kit, which is like a component that allows you to do slide overs in Xamarin Forms, and a few other little components as well.
Very nice. We might get to some of that later on because I know that Xamarin Forms is evolving and maybe stealing some of your thunder with some of these components.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very cool indeed. All right. Let's start though. Let's go back a bit. And cross-platform is something that I find a lot of demand for. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Completely, yeah. I came from a Windows Mobile background and got used to the debate with clients. Do you want to go Windows Mobile? Oh no, we want BlackBerry. Can you do that? And
Right.
you go through all of that, and then you just start coming out the other side of that. And then it was, well, can you do iOS instead? And of course, you want to find a way to easily be able to say yes without rewriting your code, retesting everything all the time.
Yeah. And Michael, I know the stuff, you're very much an iOS dev using Xamarin, but you do some Android stuff as well.
Yeah, so the way Xamarin Forms and Xamarin work is it actually allowed me, well, I started off as a web developer before I went to Xamarin. And that was like a really good experience to actually go from the JavaScript and the HTML5 trying to build web applications, worked on mobile, to actually building native applications. And the users were just so much more happy with the native applications we were building. We're finding that a lot of people these days, they might have an iOS app that's built natively and they want to go to Android, and they're like, well, why don't we actually try this cross-platform thing again? It's been 5 years or 4 years since we tried it. Everything would have matured now, and people are actually trying it out and they're realizing, yeah, it's really actually matured a lot since when it first came out.
It's a really interesting point because you're right, lots of people did kind of try cross-platform dev early. There were a bunch of options.
Yeah.
Cordova or PhoneGap or whatever it happened to be at that stage was one of those. What's the difference between that and something like Xamarin?
Well, I had a number of clients do a whole, like a 6-month study trying to look at some of the other options, and came out the other side saying the performance wasn't there, the usability wasn't there. And the difference with Xamarin is you do end up with a native app on that platform using the native controls, tapping into all the hardware elements that you need to, and you're really not restricted in that. You can end up with something that functions as though it's a native app. And whatever you put on a device now, you've got to face the reality that your app is going to be sitting side by side with other world-class apps on that device and judged against them. Even if it's a line of business enterprise app, whoever's using it is going to have many other things on there.
One of the questions I always get when I make that statement is, when is it truly native? How can it be truly native and run across platforms? Do you want to kick that one off, Mike?
So it actually started with the Mono implementation, which was done on Linux. And the guys over at doing the Mono actually decided they'd try to get it on iOS first. And they actually got C# running natively on iOS. And then from there it kind of snowballed, and they started actually doing the full native APIs for iOS, but accessing them from C#. So you really are building a native application in C# for iOS and for Android. iOS does ahead of time compilation down to an IPA, and then in Android it makes use of the JVM.
Okay, so it's actually truly using the iOS or Android build chain?
Yes.
So you're actually going through Xcode as you build Xamarin on Xamarin
and
Android,
an iOS developer would use like a UI label. If you're doing Xamarin development, you're using a UI label, exactly the same API as an iOS developer or an Android developer.
But there must be some library going on somewhere, or is it happening? Is that happening at compile time or at runtime, where that library's there?
So that's actually happening at compile time. So
Okay.
well, it is actually going through the mono implementation on the CLR, but a lot of it does happen at compile time as well. But you are using the native components.
And okay, that's very, very cool. So what is the process for doing Xamarin development? What tools am I using? What setup do I have to have? Is it going to be expensive to do it? All those kind of things.
One of the nice things if you're already a Microsoft developer is you can hook into all the tools that you're already using. So I spend most of my time in Visual Studio. I run it in a virtual machine on a Mac so I can have the build host running, which still has to run on Apple hardware.
Right.
And yeah, it all hooks in nicely most of the time. And you can get quite a smooth process from Visual Studio, including deploying onto the Mac, firing up the iOS simulator, doing your testing on there whilst you're debugging it.
Okay. I did see a demo from Evolve a little while back, where that the iOS simulator is actually surfaced inside your Windows device.
Yeah, and that's actually a really nice setup. That's the only way that I've found so far where you can actually have a multi-touch experience in a simulator on iOS, which you can't do on the Apple hardware.
Nice. And so you said you still need to go back to a Mac. Does it have to be a Mac living in somewhere on your network, or can you use a Mac live somewhere else?
You just have to be able to access it. So if it's on the network, you can use it. I know some people try and use something like Mac in Cloud. Mm-hmm. I've not played a huge amount with that, but I understand it's possible.
Okay, very, very cool. In terms of dev skills, what are the things you think a developer needs to be a Xamarin developer?
Well, if you come from a C# background, it already sort of takes just 10 steps of the way, because a lot of it is done in C#, and especially if you're doing Xamarin Forms and you've done WPF before, because that's all built on XAML, there is like a learning curve as far as mobile UI, and there is a learning curve as far as handling memory, because obviously it's a smaller device, it's got less memory, there's a few nuances that you need to know for the different platforms. So there's a bit of a learning curve there, but as a C# developer, you can develop mobile apps. I was a C# developer when I started with Xamarin.
Okay, but you're a C# web developer mainly?
Yes, I was a C# web developer before I started Xamarin.
And so, Fresh MVVM is your framework for doing MVVM stuff, and was the whole concept of building stuff with MVVM, this design pattern, something that it took you a little while to come to? Because I know that native iOS developers are really talking sort of MVC as their design pattern.
Yeah, so there is the MVVM design pattern. It isn't too hard to get your head around. Like if you've done MVC before, it's just a little bit of a step further forward past that, so it isn't too much.
One of the things I love about MVVM is it really facilitates that binding syntax you get with XAML.
Yes.
And if you are used to binding in Windows XAML or WPF or Silverlight or whatever it happens to be, moving across to the Xamarin Forms stuff is very, very neat. Let's drill down a bit into Xamarin Forms, because it does seem to be the thing that people are touting as the panacea. This is the thing that truly makes a cross-platform. So not only is your back-end pieces all common code, now your front-end can be too.
Yeah, so I don't think when Xamarin first released Xamarin Forms, I don't think they realised how popular it was going to be. It's just people want to be able to do it once and have it work everywhere. So people are downloading Xamarin Forms and they're using it. That's the first preference for most people. When it first came out, it was a lot harder to develop an app that was. It still worked, but there was quite a few issues. But 18 months down the track, it's a really different platform to what it was when it first came out.
So what sort of things does Xamarin Forms give you?
Darwin?
You go.
It just lets you abstract the whole UI layer and write it once and still have it rendered natively on each of the platforms.
So it has an abstraction of the different control types. Is that what you mean? So if you want to render something that displays text, you'll use the Xamarin Forms label?
Yes, yeah, and that will go down to a UI label on iOS and similarly for the other platforms as well. So it lets you write the UI in XAML and have it still build natively on each of the platforms.
How respectful is it of the various design languages? Because iOS has a different concept of how to do, let's say, a multi-view page from the way Android does, and it's different again from the way you might do it in a Windows Phone application.
Yeah, Xamarin are quite specific in that they want it to be native. So if there is one control that's not available on a certain platform, then they'll tend not to actually even implement that control in Xamarin Forms because it's not across the board. So generally they make sure that it has to have a native implementation before they do anything, and it is the native implementation underneath that you see.
So you must run into situations where you want to take advantage of something that's available on one platform and not another. How do you go about, I don't know, taking advantage of one of the UI kit bits, for example, or something that happens only on an Android, and find an equivalent but not identical thing in the other platforms to use?
Yeah. You go.
You can still be platform specific within the confines of Xamarin Forms. So for that, you can either look at a custom renderer or just inline, diving straight down into the native controls within the Xamarin Forms.
So you can actually render a native control as part of Xamarin Forms if you want. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So how hard is that to do?
It's not particularly difficult. Again, it maybe takes half a day to get your head around it, if that, and try your first one. And once you've done your first one, then it kind of opens the door. Certainly for me, that opened the door to having a lot more confidence in Xamarin Forms as an approach, because this was going back probably 12 to 18 months. I still viewed it as the best starting point as long as expectations were set correctly. It's not going to tick every single box and answer every single question for you, but it gives you that cross-platform starting point and gives you options to do things in a platform-specific way if there's something that it can't quite hack just yet.
Yeah.
If you've decided to use Xamarin Forms for a project, are you stuck with Xamarin Forms for the entire project? Or can you mix and match sort of some native views and some Xamarin Forms views?
Generally, once we do a Xamarin Forms application, we kind of like stick with that because there's no reason to really jump out of it. But if you have just say you have a requirement for a native control, which is a full native page, you can go and create a native renderer for that whole page.
Right.
So you're not stuck in there, and you can jump out of it and into it. I think there's like lots of extensibility points. So there's like effects, renderers, platform specifics now.
So effects is one of the things I've heard about recently as being a moderately new thing in Xamarin Forms.
Yes.
And it's been touted as a bit of a panacea between, like, it used to be that you always had to write a custom renderer. Pretty much, if you wanted to do anything vaguely other than the absolute out-of-the-box vanilla stuff, custom renderer, and that was going to get quite tedious. It's not the case anymore?
Yeah, so with effects, you can actually create a native behavior and you can attach it to a control.
Okay.
With custom renderers, it was a one-to-one mapping, so a label had a label renderer.
Right.
Whereas the effects are like, you can do it via composition, so it's actually adding that feature.
Got it.
So you can actually add lots of features to a single control, and you can have them reusable.
That's the other key thing that's really neat, I think, about the whole concept of effects, is that the ability to reuse across between controls, mix and match.
Yeah.
That's very, very neat. Can you talk at all about some of the recent projects you've been doing with Xamarin Forms, or Xamarin in general?
Most recent one I was involved in is kind of one of the products of White Clark. It's a mobile stock auditing system for vehicle finance companies. Mm-hmm. So they'll have a team of auditors they'll send out to audit dealerships and get an up-to-date list on the device of the vehicles that are supposed to be there, what wholesale finance plans they're on, when they were sold, tracking if they were sold and settled within a short space of time.
Right.
And that's all designed on, it was originally written for older devices going back to Windows Mobile, right. Deployed in South Africa where there were an awful lot of locations with very questionable coverage. So you wouldn't be able to download and upload things when you got there.
Right.
So it's all designed around just in time. You're forced, whilst you're in an area of coverage, to download all the data you think you're likely to need. Then when you're on site, it forces you through another attempt to see if there's an update before you actually go through the process of the audits, and the same for the upload at the other end.
So what sort of things can you use as a data store at the back end?
Back end, I've done a number of things. Had Azure or Azure.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean the back end. I mean, what sort of things can you use as a data store on the device?
Oh,
sorry,
it was Okay. I've tended to stick with SQLite. Had done a bit of experimentation with Couchbase and proved that with the MVVM approach, it's quite simple to pull out the SQLite data service, plug in a Couchbase one, and have all the rest of the code stay the same. So I've taken that as far as proof of concept, but not had a need to actually put it out in the field.
Okay.
SQLite fits the bill most of the time.
So pretty much anything you can do with .NET at the back end, you can do on Xamarin.
Yes.
Is that the...
Yeah, largely,
yeah? How about you, Michael?
So I can't talk about it specifically, but we had a recent project which had a requirement. It was a consumer-facing application. We got the designs which were very specific and very styled.
Yep.
And the app had to run fast, it had to look beautiful, it had to have no issues when it was released. Like, it was a consumer-facing application, it was like a very important project for our customer. And I was tossing up, should I actually use Xamarin Forms or should I do the traditional native way? We ended up going down the Xamarin Forms way, and I'm so glad we actually did. I don't think we would have actually been able to deliver it on time if we didn't use Xamarin Forms.
Interesting. So one of the things you touched on there actually covers a bit of the session you did today on performance. So you said that it needed to be fast.
Yes.
And one of the complaints I've had about Xamarin is that, it can tend to bog, or has in the past been able to bog down a bit. So there must be some things you can do to help with performance.
Yeah, so in the last 18 months, every sort of release, they've added some performance features that have just made it get faster and faster. Then the app that we built in the last 4 months, we couldn't build with the Xamarin Xamarin Forms 6 months ago.
Right.
So we've got things like data template selectors and list view recycling and Xamarin compilation. And in the future, in the next 9 months, they're very focused on performance. So they're going to do the app startup time, and they're going to try and make that a lot faster, which is one of the problems that you have with Android at the moment.
Right.
It's not. That's one area where it's not exactly ideal. Like, it'll take 2-3 seconds to actually start the Xamarin Forms application.
And what's going on in that time?
We don't actually know what the issue with Xamarin Forms is. So I think it's something to do with. I think to be honest, I don't know. That's
fair enough.
It's pretty complicated stuff, I think.
Yeah, but we've got the smart people, some of the
Yes.
best people working on it. Top
Yes.
people. Yeah, very good indeed. So the other session you did was this morning, and it was streamed live, so lots of people might have already seen it, but in case you didn't, it was what's new in Xamarin Forms.
Yes.
So how do you, it seems to me that Xamarin Forms is continually evolving. Where did you set your cutoff point for when you said something's new and when something's old?
So I actually took back to about 18 months. Took it back to 18 months just because I knew some people might have tried it 18 months ago and they haven't actually seen it recently. But there's been like a few changes, but most of them that I actually focused on were the performance features, which is what people really wanted in Xamarin Forms.
One of the things that I think is fairly new in Xamarin Forms is a control that replaces one of the fresh MVVM controls, which was the bindable picker. Bindable picker.
Yes.
I do remember building something, I guess, 12 months ago and coming to you and saying, what's happened with it? Like, how do I bind to this picker? Because you can't do it.
Yes.
And you said, yeah, it's all right. I've written one for you.
Yeah.
And now I come the other day and there's one out of the box.
Yes.
So there are things that are continually evolving. Yeah.
Yeah. There
Anything
is.
else in that vein?
So, I mean, Bindable Picker was a really good one. There's a guy called Adrian Knight who's, because now Xamarin Forms is open source, so he's actually gone in and he's actually been creating a lot of components for Xamarin Forms. So Bindable Picker is one of them. They're actually introducing a thing called Flexbox, which will actually allow you to do layouts like a web. The web has the box layout system,
right? Yep.
So you can actually implement the web box layout system in the Xamarin application.
Yeah. So at the moment you can lay things out in the grid, you can lay things out relative to the page, you can lay things absolutely.
Or stacked
or
layout.
stacked, yeah?
Yeah.
And so there's boxes.
So the box will be a great layout.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Very good indeed. So you talked a bit about some of the things they're likely to be doing in the future with Forms. One of the things that I think it's really important to be able to take advantage of is platform-specific stuff still. And Alec, you're doing a session on background processes on iOS, Android, and UWP with Xamarin. Tell us a little bit about what some of the challenges are there and what some of the solutions are.
That's an area where you really do need the platform-specific knowledge in addition to the cross-platform approach. So there's each platform has slightly different ways of managing the life cycle, slightly different events that you have to hook into to kick off the background process.
Right.
Slightly different ways of maybe requesting extended execution time or actually kicking off a background process that will survive long beyond your app being terminated. So you need to know exactly how to do that on each of the platforms and then how to interact with those processes.
And do you have to do that for every app you write, or can you write some sort of boilerplate or standard class that will work for all of your applications across all of the various platforms?
Well, as with anything, you can take a standard approach, and once you've done it a couple of times, then you'd end up with at least templates, if not something completely reusable.
So it's definitely something that's going to be run here at Ignite. Definitely something people should check out. It's I think it's on tomorrow or today.
It is, yeah, tomorrow.
But it's not in Arena 2, so it won't be streamed live, but you will be able to pick it up on Channel 9 after the fact. You're also doing another session, which is not Xamarin related, but I did want to quickly touch on because I think it's also fascinating. It's this thing called Project Centennial. Tell us a bit about that.
That's designed as a way of taking a Win32 installation file, so an MSI, running the installation into what's effectively a temporary virtual machine, monitoring what gets installed, what registry updates there are, what file system updates there are, encapsulating all those, and then spitting an AppX out of the other end that you can then deploy through the Windows 10 store, install on Windows 10, and ultimately deploy to all the platforms that Windows 10 supports, so onto Surface, onto Xbox, onto HoloLens, just from your Win32 app, and then extend the lifetime of your proven, tried and tested code.
Extend the lifetime by adding UWP capabilities?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, just being able to
deploy
bring it forward
put it in the store or whatever, however you're going to deploy it,
and then take advantages of deployment mechanisms and update mechanisms of the store, maybe billing mechanisms of the store, although you can still sideload if you need to. And then, over time, you can build in more UWP specific features on top of that.
So that's fascinating to me because there are lots of people with millions of legacy lines of legacy code, WPF applications and MFC applications and even probably WinForms applications that you can now deploy as a UWP app and then slowly take advantage of some of those. So if you want to put notifications on there or tiles, live tiles,
exactly.
or take advantage of any of the other UWP specific APIs, you can do that as part of your existing application. Now I think we did something very similar to this when we moved from Win32 to .NET. There was a set of components you could use to either include .NET components in your Win32 apps or bring the Win32 bits into your new .NET applications and take advantage of some of that code you wrote. I think that's really fascinating. So once again, you'll be able to check that out on Channel 9 after the event. Very cool indeed. Gents, if we were trying to get in touch with you or follow you on the internet somewhere, stalk you, whatever it happens to be, how do we go about that? Michael, where do we find you?
So I've got a website, michaelridland.com, so I do lots of blogging over there. Or if you want to get me on Twitter, it's RID00Z, Ridus.
Yeah, and there's definitely worth checking out Michael's blog because there's always lots of great stuff on there about Xamarin Bits and often updates to things like FreshMVM and those sorts of things, so that's definitely worth checking out. Yeah. And Alec?
I'll just give my Twitter handle, which is at Alec D. Tucker, Tucker. I do have a blog at blog.alectucker.com, but it's in dire need of updating. So
it's currently in the hiatus. But if you want to go along to the user group in Sydney, then definitely it's probably on Meetup.
Yes, you search for Xamarin Developer Group on Meetup.
Yep. And then Xamarin Hack Days and Dev Days around the place as well through.
So you can do the Xamarin Hack Day or there's the Xamarin Dev Days as well, which we haven't actually announced the dates yet. But just keep an eye out on the Xamarin blog, which will be officially announcing the Xamarin Dev Days. That
is awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming along today. I really appreciate your time. Next up, we've got a great session with Fei Lei on supercharging IoT end-to-end with the IoT Azure platform. And so after that, we'll come back and have a chat with Dr. Neil Rudin about some of the cool things he's doing as well. So we'll see you after the break.